Okay, rulers, settle down. Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to get singles for all your Force of Will and other trading card games, as well as these amazing patrons. Special thanks to guest lecturer member Vite Ramen. Thank you for your support. Class is in session. Hey there, rulers. Welcome back after a long week of Force of Will to the office hours. You said that perfectly in time with me, Paul. It is truly the multiverse. If you have some questions, you've come to the right place. It's Office Hours, your favorite ever live Force of Will podcast featuring myself, DMO73. As always, I am joined by the wonderful Mike Grants. Okay. And the maybe me in an alternative timeline, Paul Reisman.
It's a reverse scream.
Weird start today. Before we get started, I do want to say thank you all so much for being here. If you want to consider supporting the channel, there's a couple of big ways to do it. First off, you can go ahead and check the link down below for pre-orders with Odyssey Games for the 7th. The set is now currently on pre-order for both buy a box and pre-release kits, so go check that out. And then you can also consider clicking that little join button down below, joining us as a member to get access to all kinds of cool perks, like being able to potentially be a tutoring session member. You can get a playmat, you can get signed merchandise, you can get the emotes, Discord names, submitting your decks for deck critique, all kinds of stuff like that.
A virtual kiss from me.
That's not on the list anywhere, so that's between you and Mike. And also, it is important to note that during GPs, the chat is restricted to members only. So if you want to be a part of the chat and consider picking up your Ruler School curriculum, click that join button down below. We're right now 100 out of 125 to try to get our Troll Brad emote, so consider picking that up. So, guys, we've had like 6 different tournaments of varying sizes in various parts of the world in various formats, and we have a GP this weekend in the United States. What are you playing this weekend? If you were there.
I'm playing my buddy's bachelor party.
Okay, so very clearly playing Wolfgang for Mike. Paul would be playing Violet.
Wanderer.
In Wanderer, and I'd be playing Ragnarok. That's 3 very different choices, and that comes to why we're talking about tonight, this idea of the meta multiverse. We've had a lot of, as we've ramped into the competitive season, there has been a lot more opportunity to get speculative, look at tournament data, look at what decks are winning, what deck lists are winning, stuff like that. And what I've noticed in the conversation is a focus on the cards and not the context. And so I think that it's important to kind of have a conversation about that, because that is something that I think will play a big factor if you're someone who is really digging into the data and potentially playing in the GP this weekend. The fowtcg. So I do want to, first off, before we jump in, I want to bring you the perspective of someone who has done a lot of looking at a lot of different tournaments, which is our man, the man who does our tournament reports, Paul. So, Paul, I want to ask you, when you're working on the tournament reports, when you're looking at data and kind of getting speculative and kind of give your thoughts, what are some of the things that you try to look at, think about as you're kind of like formulating your opinions of what's come out of a tournament?
Yeah. So first of all, what's really interesting about the tournaments that I've covered recently are the 2 biggest. The first one was our OGP, US, which inspired a lot of card choices in the Parma, Italy GP. So there's things like that where I try and see a little bit of continuity between the different tournaments at different points in time. But then I also tend to look at card choices. I tend to look at conversion rates. I try and see, how many of X ruler did we have in the tournament and how many of those made it into the actual final. And I've started to do that more and more because I like to see how many of the rulers that are most popular actually make it into the top cut, and what things are actually rising to the top as a result of that. So, for instance, way back in our OGP, one of the things that I found really fascinating is how many violets we actually had in the top cut. I think we had 2 or 3.
3.
Whoa. Ah. And one actually made it all the way.
It's the TVA. He's attacking Bali. No, he's talking too much.
Coming. Don't talk about it. Open up. But like Violet actually made it into the top cut. So then when I looked at Parma and I made that comparison, there were 3 Violets in the whole tournament, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. And that's probably why you see so many Feasting Moosh Darts in the top cut, so many Lycion decks, because there was no threat there for them at all. Not even a Wolfgang list made it. To just found that very interesting.
Yeah.
Right? I don't necessarily settle on the fact that X deck with X card won, or X deck had, X amount of spots in the top cut. I tend to just look at, what's the whole playing field and what happened to get these results. And so I think I'll just leave it there, and we can talk more if we need to.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that you make. Is like, well, okay, Paul's gone.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye. I think that's a good point that you bring up, Paul, about that. It's not really about just looking at what deck won. Or like what ruler won. There's a lot of different aspects of it, like conversion rate, like you said, I think has become increasingly in the meta that we're in. I think as we transition to more of what we would consider a quote unquote solved meta, I think you can start to really look at that idea of like, what's the conversion rate? Because we're not fresh off the meta, first time people playing these cards. It's okay, now people have a deck idea. Now we're iterating off that deck idea to see what we can kind of evolve and push it past, to see if we can improve its success rate, balance out its success rate against the changes from other rulers, stuff like that. So the idea of conversion rate, I think, is super important. Mike, as more of the competitive player, when you talk about this, like, idea
big quotes around that.
Yeah. I mean, of the 3 of us here, of the 3 of us here in the past 2 years, you are the one who has played in the most competitive tournaments. So there you go.
And got the most wins.
Hey, I'm technically undefeated in tournaments. So
it's true. Jeremy's too strong for this world. Can't be defeated.
Can't even drop a game. It's crazy.
Unbelievable.
So I do want to talk about as you look at tournament results and anything else, as you take it in incorporation into your testing, what are some of the things that you're kind of considering beyond just looking at, oh, hey, this deck won?
Yeah, a lot of the big thing that we like to look at here, especially when I'm testing with some of the guys at my locals, because they're the ones who've been kind of building the decks that have been doing well, and I've been over here just memeing and building things for people that are trying to learn the game at this point, because I have zero drive for competitive play right now, considering I've got
a paid invite
winning in probably for whatever's coming next year, because hearing what's happening in Japan, I don't know if it's happening this year, but who knows, whatever. Anyway, that's besides the point. But the big thing is that seeing what cards go into these decks has been a really big deal in terms of just like what our players have been thinking about doing, just because a lot of our guys don't think that any of the lists are fully refined. And I 100% agree with that sentiment as well. I love the way that the decks are currently constructed. Friends are correct. A competitive player, Mike. But the big thing is that, like, with these decks not being fully refined, I'm mostly talking about Feasting Moosh Dart in this scenario, just because it's the deck that has probably the most permutations and combinations you can make, especially with how wide and varied the support pool is for them. How, oops, haha, 6, one extra card in the hand all the time, and also 3 mulligans. Oops, haha, it's the most consistent deck. You get that. So a lot of what our players tend to look at is, the smaller tech choices that go into the decks. The US list that topped, I don't believe we're running either we're running like less copies or weren't running any copies of the Sigurd plus Institute.
Some of them were.
Whatever
some of the feasting decks were.
Yeah,
that is kind of the ones that took first and fourth were all like very heavy green, white, blue.
Yeah.
It was like the Dolly package as well, which is a pretty a pretty expensive engine when
Yeah.
when you're like walking along in terms of how much deck space it takes when you're also
Yep.
adding in the fact that you're playing 4 Prisia, 4 Lycia, 4 Melfi, and all the cancel suites that go with it. Like there's not a lot of room when you're playing that engine. So certainly a lot of, like you said, so many different iterations, right?
Yeah. And the big thing is that like because so the interesting part of that comes from the fact that like the highest ranking player in the US tournament did not have the same list as the highest ranking Feetsing Mujar player in Parma. And like obviously it didn't take the whole event. Violet was probably teched out to, just roast on Feetsing Mujar at that point, which is a great meta call to make considering how popular it was before that, how all the European players are, kind of like grounding their way into that kind of space, and the fact that in any given tournament, a U.S. tournament is guaranteed to have at least 3 to 4 times the amount of red players just represented overall.
Yeah, you bring
which,
that's kind of the next point, is that like beyond just card choices, beyond like past event choices or how soft the meta is, I think one of the super important things to be considerate of is just like player approach to the game, and like play how competitive environments by presence of people differ based on region, right? So like the very different consideration is, that's like one of the two biggest ones, is like United States players, particularly North America players in general, play what they want to play, right? They just enjoy it. So naturally that field is going to be more scattershot.
Yep.
The competitive players are going to probably fall on one of two lists, or like one of two rulers. List not for sure, but notwithstanding. But again, the competitive players are not the majority in terms of like the high tier competitive players.
That's part of the reason that I really do believe. Like I've heard this kind of like uttered in some group chats and just across the board, but it definitely seems like European players tend to be like on average the more skilled players in terms of just overall tournament success and overall play style that I've seen. But US players tend to be a little more out of the box thinking when it comes to their deck choices, a little more techy, a little bit more like, even like one of the biggest examples has to be like when I first started playing the game, Ron Miles was one of the first ones that kind of gave me a little bit of insight into how small tech choices, like even one-ofs in a fairly consistent deck, can make a world of difference in the game. And now that we're seeing the most consistent decks we've ever seen in this game's history, it's a huge deal, honestly.
Yeah, and I think you also have to look at, so forcible players in the United States, like red, like playing what they want to play. The like hyper spike competitive players are definitely the slim majority, or a slim minority by comparison to the average person who wants to come in. Secondly, I think the thing you have to consider is in terms of the European environment, in terms of player caliber, in terms of player approach to the game, is like the competitive drive in terms of like, we are at a tournament, I am here to compete and be victorious, is so much more prevalent in the through line of what we see from those tournaments. And there's also this idea of like, not only do I want to be the best, but I want to be the best at the best deck. So there is a very, you can go back through Forcible's history and you can look at European events, and it is very predominant that their events, particularly if it's like post a single event has happened, like it's like not the first event out of the gate, like those events get slammed with the best deck. I would say like the comfy strong choice is what I would
the
call
most
it.
consistent choice, I think, is the biggest thing.
Because
That's
it becomes
big.
about, because their events are predicated and driven by, I want to prove that I am the best pilot out of this deck, and I can outpilot anyone else that's piloting this deck. And so I think that you have to recognize that that plays a part in rulers that we see, in ruler lineups that we see, but also you have to then apply that to results to take it at grain of salt when you're changing to a different environment, right? Like Violet, it was like, first off, it was like a 28-man event, so like also recognize that player size is super relevant. So like there wasn't quite as much room for like random offshoot one-ofs. or like two ofs. There just wasn't that variety there built in because of player size. And like you apply an event like that where there are 3 Violet players, and you go, yes, I'm going to take that exact data. I'm going to think that's what our GP is going to be. I'm going to go to the United States. I am going to face Violet for 7 rounds. Because you weren't thinking about it, and like US players have a different mindset, and you're going to have to acknowledge the fact that those are 2 different player environments, and if you cannot, you have a very high likelihood of like screwing yourself over. Because if you don't think that Violet, like even having these tournament results, if you don't think that Violet is going to be like the number 2 most represented deck at this tournament, you are insane. Like,
Correct.
Because that's just how US players play. We like
everybody wants
red.
to play the big woman.
We like red, right? And so I think there's so much more to apply when thinking about deck choices, when thinking about event results, when thinking about like percentages, to try to figure out what the big questions of the meta are. And I think we're at this stage where, as we go into this last week, where it's not just about testing, it's not just about tech choices, but you need to be asking and figuring out what the right big questions are. And I think the big question that we can answer right now is like, what kind of players can I expect to be there, in terms of what kind of environment they're going to create? It's going to be an environment where there are going to be competitive players, but there are going to be lots of players who are just there to have a good time, and are going to have tweaked their pet project to be as competitive as possible. And that means you're going to have a lot of really random rulers that you might not be expecting. And you don't necessarily need to like tech for them, because like maybe you just don't need to. But it's important to recognize that that's going to be the environment you're walking into. You got to be ready for it. Like, you just need to be ready for
The
it.
environment has to be at least 5 people on tier 0 Mikage, just because Toby keeps putting it into the chat.
Yeah,
you always have to watch out for tier 0 Mikage.
Tier 0 Mikage might be there, right?
Yeah, it's got to be there.
I think for this upcoming tournament, the second big question that in my head I still have, I think it's the most important question, and I still haven't found an answer to it that I feel comfortable putting my bet on, is how much United States players are going to move on from Violet.
Knowing the U.S.'s history with red, approximately 0.
I see. That's the thing. Like that feels like a safe bet, but we're also coming into now 3 tournaments that Violet didn't convert, except for that one like 16-man one this past weekend. But like Violet didn't convert, so like the question becomes: does that influence people? Do we see a little smaller attendance percentage on Violet? Is it gonna be like, nah, I'm gonna try even harder on Violet and prove to you that she's good? Like, I don't feel comfortable answering that question right now. And going into this weekend, I will put money on the fact that I think that is the most relevant question for this upcoming GP's meta.
I think one of the big things to take away from... Sorry, Paul.
I was going to say... So, first, I just want to say, like, some of the rough numbers that we had from Parma GP, from Gian Cremo, just on the video, said roughly 3 Ragnarok, 5 Violet, a Dark Alice. Didn't top, so don't play Dark Alice. 1 Wolfgang.
Don't tell that to Derek.
17 Feasting Mujdart, 3 Feasting Almirias.
Yeah.
Literally 66% of that tournament was Lycion. So there's that. But the thing that these lists don't tell you is, why didn't X deck win? Right? Why did Violet not win those tournaments, even though she was, 5 of the 30 decks? Why didn't she win? It doesn't tell you that. Like, if there's anything I could appreciate doing the tournament report, it's that there are times where I have to guess as to why certain decks did not win, even though Derek, the week before, got top 2. And I know Derek's a great player, but there was also like 1 or 2 other Violet lists in that top cut.
Yeah,
so I was
took second and third.
Why did Violet not win in this tournament at all? Like, why did it not place? And that's the thing the lists won't tell you. So you have to be careful as to like, all these lists are here, but they're not in the top 8, so these decks must be bad. It's like, well, why didn't they win? That's when you have to start asking questions of the community.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Mike, you were gonna say something?
Oh yeah, I think one of the big things is that it seems that the Fitzing Mujjar decks are a lot more out of the box in terms of what they're doing right now. What I mean by that specifically is that a lot of the Violet decks tend to be, I opened 3 boxes of this set, I got all the things I needed to make Violet, I'm going to put Violet together using the things that I built from these 3 boxes. And like it's designed that way. You know, she hasn't really had much support other than, you know, Rebirth of Legend having Mariabella. And when you have, you know, Heart to Heart Talk plus 36 good cards from ADW, you're going to get, you know, like just some of the general, just, you know, good stuff Violet decks doing what they do, but you're not going to come to a tournament and do the best you can do with just 36 cards Violet plus 4 Heart to Heart Talk. So I think that a lot of the Violet players just have, I think Feith Mujjar is solved. That's going to be my hot take. I think that deck is solved.
I think it's pretty dang close. Yeah.
But I don't think Violet is even remotely close to being solved.
I would agree.
And that's my hot take today.
I would agree with that statement wholeheartedly. And like that to me is, I think people have also noticed that ADW is actually, and Rebirth of Legend is still a lot, very, very much available. Like you can get singles and sealed for that set, as well as people are noticing that Epic of the Dragon Lord is still very much available, and Magic Stone War is like hard to find, but not to the point of like exorbitant prices. And so like you're seeing people start to pick stuff up,
like AO3.
Yeah, it's not AO3 level of like can't find it. So you know that plays a factor into it as well. You know, is in terms of that. You also have to think of, we're going from an online GP of 103 to an in-person GP. However, you also have to consider the fact that it's an in-person GP in typically the most attended, if not the second most attended location in all of Force of Will's history. The Collinsville area GP is traditionally one of the biggest. So then it's like
probably
okay,
second
cool.
just to Northfield, but yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. So then it's a matter of like, okay, cool, is our attendance going to go up because it's an in-person event and people want to go? Is it going to go down because people are nervous to travel? Is it going to go down a lot because of COVID? Is it going to go down because of a little bit? Are we going to get people who want to play in person but couldn't play webcam? Like that's question 3, right, of this event, is like attendance. Right. So another question that I just don't have to answer, but like these, in my opinion, as you make a deck choice, these are the questions to really consider. And 1, I feel like we can answer. 2, I have no idea, but like I'm gonna be thinking about it and talking about it and listening, putting my ear to the pulse, because if I was playing competitively, I personally wouldn't feel comfortable picking a deck until I have a sense of at least a safe answer for all 3 of those questions. Because I think that if you pick the wrong thing based on trying to answer those questions too early, you absolutely could blow yourself out. And that would feel real bad. Ryboss96, any questions on attendance for this weekend, seeing as this is the first in-person GP in a while? So currently, I would feel happy with anywhere from 60 to 80. I think
I was about to say 60 sounds about right, honestly, for the first one in a while.
I would feel happy with anything from 60 to 80. I would be flabbergasted and amazed if we break 80, just because it's the first one in a while. I would not be surprised if we fall between 40 to 60. And that's not because of like, that's not anything to do with the game. That's purely because of the context of it's the first one in a while. That's gonna cause issues.
Right? I mean, how much was last Minnesota GP? I forget how many players were there.
Last Minnesota before that was, we
still had 2020.
We still had that one. No, that was during COVID because we were wearing masks inside. That one broke 90. Yep,
I remember that. So
like again.
There's potential.
There's potential in either direction, right? Especially since there's cash.
Only issues like it's summertime too, which is one of the big things. Like
people,
that's another thing.
Cash on the line. Like there's a lot of different factors. So anywhere from like 50 to 100, I have different levels of would not be surprised and want to see. But that would be kind of the range that. But again, that goes back to the fact of question 3. I have no idea. right? What that answer is. I don't want to, because
Mhm.
we could have 45 people show up and 30 of them are on Violet. Right?
That sounds
of
US.
those two, like those two questions, right? And what if I called now that I was going to play Wolfgang, thinking that everyone was going to go play Feithmuj because that's comfortable, and then I have a lower attendance and a much higher rate of Violet. I've answered those two questions wrong. I am not going to do well at that tournament. And so I just think these are the kinds of questions beyond just playing the matchups that I think are important for people to be considerate of, because there's so much in it. Is not, this is like the worst meta to feel like it's solved, because really only the triangle is like
Only one deck is solved.
the triangle is like pseudo solved, but the decks from 2 of the 3 points of the triangle have not been solved at all. So it's like, it doesn't feel comfortable.
I ask you, how do you solve Ragnarok if your name is not Minha? That's my only thing I could ask.
But then,
at
yeah,
this point.
so that's a valid question. But I've literally been watching Ragnarok. This, like, I think that's the other thing too, is you have to understand, like, what Paul has said, right? Of why were decks not winning. I also think you have to think, like, why certain, like, how certain other decks are winning. When you're looking at the decks that aren't the solved decks, I think you have to actually put in the time to find out, like, okay, this is supposedly a good matchup against the deck I'm trying to beat. Why? And I think that's good for both the person trying to play the off meta deck and the person playing the meta deck. Because I have watched Ragnarok players this past week dumpster Feithmuj. And it is for things that when you are first thinking about Ragnarok, you do not think about. And so, like, actually sitting down and doing that, and, like, digging beyond the deck list, doing the dive, like, there's more to this meta than possible. And I think that also plays into the fact of the difference between the US and the European events, right? Is because European players, for the predominant most part, I'm not going to say that all of them are, right? But the pattern of them is, they find what they consider to be the best deck, and then the rest of their meta is just tweaking for the mirror, and that's as far as they go.
Paul, real quick,
unless your name's Minha, and then you're just constantly playing singleton decks.
Yeah. Paul, real quick, can you pet your cat for me?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is from Mike. Yes.
Logan, I don't think we're in a tier 0 meta at all.
Oh, so cute.
So cute that it kicked Mike out. I don't think we're in a tier 0 format. I don't think we're in a tier 0 format at all. I think we have very, very powerful tier 1 decks. I think we are in a meta where tier 1.5 feels risky but can convert. I just don't think we're in a tier 0 format.
Oh god, no. Oh god, no. No way.
I think tier 1 feels very strong, but I don't think it's tier 0.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely some decks that are rising to the top. It feels very much like a watered down version of Scheherazade meta, where, like, you clearly had Keurig and you clearly had Sherry at the top, and Keurig was so good it crept everything else out of the meta, but nothing is happening quite like that with the other decks. I would say probably Wolfgang is up there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like, it's getting close. I think Wolfgang, Ragnarok, in my opinion, the rogue decks to kind of watch out is like Wolfgang, Ragnarok, and Excalibur Genesis.
The spicy tech.
I do like Wolfgang.
Yeah.
Big sword.
Like, it's like if Scheherazade meta felt better.
Yeah.
Because, like, there were 2 decks in that whole format, and now it's like we have that dichotomy going on between, Feasting Mujdart and Violet, but there are also other decks that have some validity. It's not just simply like these 2 or scrub out,
Yeah.
That was probably tier 0 meta as best defined in this game.
Yeah. Play these two or lose. Yeah. Gray Grumbler, always solved is what players are comfortable playing. That's a good sentiment. I think you hit the nail on the head there. is that we have solved what players are comfortable playing, but that doesn't mean that we've solved it. I think the matches that we're going to watch this coming weekend are going to be similar, but also different, to be enjoyable differently than the online event. Can I get some rag lists, because I haven't been able to crack? Just go to Min. Go to Minha. That man's cracked it. Logan, just go to Min. I'm sure he's cracked it. I'm positive that he's cracked it.
I guarantee Ragnarok will never be solved as long as it's in the metagame. Mostly because you have so many different options and so many different decks are going to change, and from tournament to tournament, the metagame is going to change. So your rag list will change.
I also think that Ragnarok, in terms of what that ruler wants to be doing, has significantly changed from what it was in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
When we first saw Ragnarok, it was fill your deck with as many bursty combos as possible, pop off turn one in the most variety of different ways, and try to win. That's not what Ragnarok's doing anymore. Ragnarok wants to be the almost like a hate bears kind of deck, where he's just like, okay, cool, I have 6 very, very good hate effects. Here's a matching video. Jeez Louise, my Google thinks I'm trying to talk to him, right? I have 6 very, very good like answer effects on my front side, or on me in general, and then I have 40 good cards of like counter grind hate that you have to now play through, right? That is completely different than what Ragnarok was doing before, and I think that takes getting used to as well. That man literally just tells me to draw better. Jeez Louise, man. King Kong, what have you missed so far? We've just been talking about how it's important to not just look at cards, that there's a lot of context when you look at meta environments. So let's see. Oh, sure. That's a good point, Shocker. You can leave that stuff in, maybe just not play as many different like pop-off combo variants. Mike's just dead. It's fine. Mike's gone forever.
My internet's not having a good time right now, and I don't know why.
It's okay. You're back now. So let's talk about this, right? So I think this is a good exercise. So let's say we get 70. Let's just throw out a number, right? To me, 70 feels plausible for this weekend, right? Let's say we have 70 players. So let's answer questions 2 and 3 like proactively, right? Let's say 70 players show up and 22 of them are playing Violet. So about a third of the field. That's what you kind of are putting your guess on, right? So then from that position, for the 2 of you guys, what deck do you think you would be on for this weekend? That's question 1, and then I'll follow up with question 2. So with everything we've talked about, knowing that it's a United States event, knowing what everything is, answering questions 1, 2, and 3 with a 70-man event, 22 Violet, what do you think you would pilot this weekend to have your best chance of winning?
Valentina, because I already have my invite.
If you didn't have your invite, Mike...
Anyway,
wow.
If you didn't have your invite, Mike, what do you think you would play?
If I didn't have my invite, I think and anticipating like what is it? You said 22 Violet or
Let's
something.
Say, like about a third. Like about a third of the field is Violet.
I would probably be on some kind of Almerius variant. Not gonna lie.
Okay.
I don't know what exactly it would look like, but I feel like I would try and do something cheeky with the Final Battle combo. The problem is that it's a little bit weak to Violet decks maining Void, but I only think they main 1, maybe
Usually
maximum.
Usually 1.
Yeah.
2. So the chance that you get absolutely roasted by it is very low at this point. Okay. So I think something along those lines, some kind of cheeky combo that Elmirius can pull off, because that judgment ability is very strong. I don't know if it would be strictly a Featsing Elmirius deck. It probably could be because, oops, haha, Featsing's best ruler combo with every other ruler. But it could be something along the lines of like Elmirius Cruz Ballesta to get consistent stones to do it.
So
Since
something
you're kind of
final
relying on your
stancy.
turn one Rhea.
So you'd be
Yeah, exactly.
You'd be final stancy. Paul, what about you?
I'd probably just play Violet. So you've
You'd be one of
heard
the,
this from me a lot.
You'd be one
Yeah,
of the.
Spoken like a true
Violet
American.
Yeah.
Well, if there's anything that I would say, and I've said this to you, Jeremy, before you've gone to go get an invite, if you want to go and be competitive and be successful, be the problem. And Violet, I think, is the deck that has the best chance to answer the Feasting Wujdart lists. And then you just have to figure out the mirror match. And like you said, like Violet has a lot of room to experiment and sort of adapt. Either that or I'd play Olivia. Just
Fair.
She is bursty, kind of out of nowhere, kind of has that unexpected sense of things.
I will say that Olivia's. I will say I do want to say Olivia's a great call, considering that Olivia took 9th place in that tournament that had all the Violets in it, and had a very solid matchup. Joe, I've actually been talking with Joe about his list that he put together, and he's got, obviously he's like, the list wasn't fully refined to the way that he wanted it, but I think that there's something there. Because, man, Dahlia at instant speed is just crazy for 0 mana.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
just put that Bahamut back in the hand. Just.
I think for me,
Oh, never mind.
I would have been grinding a little bit more, obviously, to test it. But like, if I've like brought, imagine I've done the grinding, so I feel comfortable with everything, I can make the call based on answering those questions, right? I probably would play something around the lines of either a white, black, red, or a blue, black, red, Wolfgang. Personally, and the red inclusion would be to make my Wolfgang match or my Violet matchup feel a little bit more comfortable, to be able to play Flames of the Outer World. And then the question becomes, do you want blue for like Academy Guard to like stun out, or do you want white to shore up your Violet matchup more? So almost like a Wolfgang Witches deck. So like that to me would be like the call that I would make, would be like playing Wolfgang Witches. I don't have a list. I just have theory crafting in my head. But again, in answering questions 2 and 3, that would be the choice that I would make. Now, applying next step is the question here, and I'd be interested to hear what you people want to say. Violet Mirror is easy; just do mulls and show each other your hands. Yeah,
that's pretty standard. Yeah.
So then the question becomes, the follow up becomes, knowing that that's our tournament. So say all 3 of us are casting, we're just watching, not playing. We have this 70-man event. 22 of them are Violet. The rest is predicated on the usual spread, similar to what we saw from the last online event. What do you think our top 8 looks like in terms of, like, obviously not lists, but in terms of like potential? And I'll just say for the sake of it, like Lycion is like a deck type, like regardless of ruler combination, because I think
that's fair.
I think all those decks are just like, they're practically the same deck. It's just like what the end game like final piece is and kind of what their tech choices are, but it's the Lycion deck. So anybody can go first.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Excellent.
Paul, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. So this is the exact same call that I made back when we had the OGP, and I would say anywhere from 4 to 5 Lycion decks in Top Cut, just because I know a lot of top players see the consistency of that deck and the ability to sculpt your hand really, really, really well and just play big boys and play Prescience, continue to just find your answers. They really like that idea. I would also say at least 2 to 3 of the Violet list, then 1 to 2 kind of wild cards, like what could possibly get to the top. And that's because American players like to experiment and like to break out and do different things. And sometimes we have competitive players who are like, I'm not going to play any of those because I figured out how to make Ragnarok work or Wolfgang work or Olivia work. and I'm just going to do those.
Yeah.
And to me, that's diverse. Like that feels fine. Like those can be the best decks and have other decks included. It doesn't necessarily feel awful.
Yeah. I think combo formats, combo top tier formats are incredibly polarizing because people sometimes just don't like pure combo decks to be the deck that wins. It's just in general a typical thing that people just don't like. So I get where it feels like bad to have that be, but I would agree with you. I think that my call would be anywhere from 3 to 5 Lycaons, anywhere from 2 to 3 Violets, and then somewhere between like 1 to 2 like Rogue. Right, I think that can be.
I will predict there will be 1 Excalibur Lycion deck in the top cuts.
That's significant enough because you're using the Lycion for something different, so I'm okay with that.
Yep.
Oh, hold on. We haven't even talked about the Faria list, right? So I would say like 1 to 2 Faria lists would be in the top cut. Easy.
Yeah, I'd put that in Rogue personally, but yeah, I
put 1.
Yeah.
I also
say like definitely 1 to 2, and then like a Wolfgang, maybe.
I could see somebody in the U.S. figuring out Ragnarok. Not quite as
Yeah, I could also see a player in the
United States. Unless we want to see somebody get real spicy.
I'm curious.
Because we could see... it would be Magna combo.
Stop.
Magna Priscia, baby.
Fall down. Stop, leave. So, no, I think that, this idea, and I think we have to think about it too, of going back to what you said before, Paul, with the Sherry Kirik meta, right? Of how this is like similar but different.
Yeah.
I think the nature of the decks are different than Sherry and Kirik were, but it's a similar environment, I'll agree. But if you look back on those results, it was like 7 Sherry and 1 Kirik.
Exactly.
And so the fact that we're on this environment of like 3 different categories that we can feel comfortable making a call of having a place in that top 8, I think we're not speaking to players' satisfaction with that those are the decks that are there. We're speaking to the fact that there are 3 categories of decks that we feel comfortable saying they will, like, we wouldn't be surprised if they got there, even if they're not in like equal parts. So that, I think that's the metaverse, the multiverse that we're in right now, is like that's how things are different. So we're gonna cast it and we're gonna see what happens.
Yeah.
And
who knows?
Who knows? Because also,
Who knows?
any of those rulers could, like Ragnarok, some kind of Lycion list, Excalibur, Violet, Wolfgang, Olivia. Like, I personally wouldn't be surprised or asking the questions of how is that possible if any of those rulers won the event. I think that there are some certain underdogs. Like, I think that like Wolfgang is in an environment that it could top, but it would struggle to close. I think Ragnarok is in a similar boat. I think Excalibur's in a similar boat. I think Violet and Feasting are like bickering at each other constantly. But like at the end of the day, if any of those rulers,
that's bickering.
Yeah, that's bickering. If any of those rulers like won the event, I wouldn't be left sitting there going, "Huh?" And so that's a cool feeling as well. I think to kind of be able to go into an event thinking about, because again, to go back to like the Scheherazade meta or the Fox Priscia meta, anytime anything that wasn't Sherry, Kirik, Fox Priscia even topped, the entire community went, "How? How is possible?"
How do?
How do? Please tell. Who cheat? But like that's not what this
Federico.
that's not what this environment is.
Mm-hmm.
So those are my kind of closing
Yeah.
thoughts on that idea.
Yeah, I would say the power rankings would be Feasting Mujdart or some sort of Lycion list. Tier 2 would be Violet. Tier 3 on the power rankings would be our rogue decks that are really consistent, really
Sure.
powerful, have something to offer. Everything else, you know, if it made it, great. It's not expected to.
Yeah.
Olivia or Dollar.
Aopharia stun.
Surprisingly good.
Chronos loops.
How do Lycion if can't play spells?
How do Lycion if 2 Chronos on board?
How do Lycion
Chant.
if opponent eat deck? Again, my strategy is flawless here. I don't know if anybody else has picked up on it yet, but just eat their Lycions. They can't legally stop you.
Yeah, you just get DQ'd from the event. But hey, if they don't have any more Lycions, they also DQ'd from the tournament.
Yeah, it's an illegal deck.
You've sacrificed yourself
can you
for
do?
the tournament.
For the greater good.
That's my role in this life.
I think Dollifaria, Dollifaria is a pet deck that I think if I had another month and a half of grinding to actually test competitively, I would be more comfortable putting a stake on. My sample size is too low. I will say, however, that I have V1, which was pre-cutting a lot of the chaff to what you saw in the GP or what you saw in the feature match, was like this close to taking a game off of Violet, like handedly taking a game off of Violet. That deck has also, V2 of that deck has done pretty dang well against Lycion decks.
All right,
and also,
so hear me out on this.
Hold on.
Here.
I also played it against. Someone said.
I got an idea.
Hold on. Someone said to put it up against Excalibur Genesis, a similar kind of like bursty aggro deck, to see what I did. I have played 10 games of that list versus Excalibur Genesis, including an Excalibur Genesis playing the Lycion package, and I have dropped 1 game.
Damn.
With
Dollifaria. Well, clearly, the Lycion Excalibur playing it correctly, because the way you have to do it is you got to go the turn 1 Melf.
No, he did that. He did that.
Okay.
And
did he follow it up with? Did he follow? So he didn't follow it up with one more big show.
The combo's so powerful.
Yeah, we don't know what you're saying, whatever this combo is.
We must keep it secret.
Keep it safe.
Persia, whatever's.
Whoa.
I missed half what just happened. My internet just shorted out for a hot second.
Yeah, so did we. We missed like all of it. Gosh. It's okay.
It's fine.
It was too good.
Too good. My internet couldn't handle it.
It's
just Big Brother, man. Too powerful.
They don't want the people knowing about the deck.
Yeah. So I think the point that we're trying to make here at the end of it is that, you know, as an observer, as a speculator, and everything else, like there are so many factors beyond.
I just saw it catch up my entire movement on the stream.
Yeah, that was a lot. Maybe stop watching the stream while you're streaming if your internet's being bad.
Yeah, but I want to read chat.
Yeah, so just like pause the video and read the chat. Or watch it on your phone or something like that. Anyway,
use your data.
So the thing that I have to say here is that there's so much to consider beyond just deck lists. That I want people to not fall into the trap of making analysis of what a meta is or isn't purely based on just card lists, because that can lead people down a road of just making the wrong calls or having the wrong assumptions. Case in point, I was talking with a player the other day who I mentioned the idea of Ragnarok, and they went, "How? Not even, no way, not even possible." And then we talked about it for 25 minutes about like how it was winning, everything else based on my experiences. And yesterday they were saying, "Okay, so I legitimately might be on Ragnarok." I'm like, there's a lot more exploration and experimentation when you consider all of the factors that play into what makes a deck successful or what a meta environment it's going to be walking into. And like, you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't explore all those. Unless you just want to show up and play. If you just want to show up and play in side events, like, yeah, sure, whatever. Play whatever you want. But like,
we're getting back to normal, right? So it's this, you actually got to go through the gauntlet again, where it's like, if you're like, okay, I need to see how this deck does against this deck in particular, what can it do to stop me? And like actually like go through that whole like ringer all over again.
The grind, this is more of a grind format than I think people understand. Or sorry, this is more of a grind format than you would think it is just looking at top 8 lists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the meta is certainly not solved. Pieces are coming together.
Yeah.
Like, we know some of the top decks. We know how those top decks tend to win right now. But we also know that there's a lot of room to change and alter and grow. And this is all before we get another set, too.
Yeah! Next set, the 7th.
It's end of August, right?
Yeah. Pre-release weekend is my birthday. My birthday
as always.
weekend.
Tradish.
Birth.
So that's a whole nother month where we get just a test, and there's one GP
and
left
there's one
in
more
August,
GP. It actually just got announced today, the online GP. It's $25. You get all the promos. Your shipping is included in the promos. It's being run by Carta Magica. This event is just an unpaid invite, but it's happening on August 14th and 15th. Capped at 124 players, but Carta puts on a really good show. And yeah, go show them some support, because I'm glad they got a GP as well. So we've literally had a GP every single month. We might be casting that one. I might also be judging it instead. So we'll let you know as soon as we know, because I technically am a judge. So we might be judging that one because of availability of who's there to be able to judge for them, as opposed to casting it. But you'll know before we get there. New meta coming in September. Yeah, woo, the 7th.
Fall. Get ready.
I do want to talk about, just real quick, based on some of the information we know, is I thoroughly anticipate this next meta to change drastically from what we already even know has been revealed just by the rulers for 3 reasons. One, Carlina makes 2 cards.
Called it.
Carlina makes 2 cards that are very good, much more accessible, and easier to use in a lot of different ways, which is Blank Page and Battle Comes to an End. Like, those are things that I think are going to drastically impact the meta. And Belial also says, "Hi, are you a combo deck that likes to take my life down to 40 in one turn but has no follow-up if you lose? I start the game with 2 turns of You Can't Hurt Me." Whoops. I also think that's going to play a big impact. Those are my hot takes as we leave tonight. Like, I think the meta is going to be forced to shift just because of those.
I just think it's only going to be Aston Mirrors, and nobody's going to ever win the game.
God, that sounds awful. That sounds
just Astema.
That sounds
40
so,
stall cards.
It sounds so bad.
Just
oops, all Astema.
Oops, all Astema. So that is it for us for tonight. It has been
something with Photoshop. Please make this.
It has been wonderful talking with you all. We hope you enjoyed it. Again, a few reminders: if you like what we do, you want to consider supporting us. I say a lot of new people who aren't members in the chat. Thank you so much for being here. As a reminder, if you want to watch the webcam event or the event this weekend, you can watch it if you're not a member. But if you are a member, you can participate in the chat. Not this week because we're prepping for the GP, but next week. But like after we get past the GP, members get access to our videos 1 day early. Our non-live stream videos, they get access to those 1 day early. So that's something for you to consider there. You also get wonderful things like the emotes and everything else and lots of other perks. You can check it out by clicking that join button down below. It's the easiest way to show your support for the channel, but we're glad you're here regardless. And also, again, as we talk about the 7th, if you haven't already gotten your pre-orders in for Odyssey games, you can check them out down below. They have both pre-release kits and boxes available today right now for shipping within the United States. So with that, we're going to call it for tonight. You have all been a wonderful audience, and as myself, as I've been DMO73 as always, and I've been joined by the wonderful Mike Grants, even with his terrible internet connection. Perfect. And the insightful Paul Reisman saying, class dismissed. Have a good night.
Class is in session.
Wait, no, that's